We are going to talk about backyard chickens, and I've been doing this for a few years now. These are some of our own chickens. I've got lots of pictures, lots of stories to tell, and I'm going to try to condense it down. I could talk for a long time about chickens. So if you have questions, please feel free to ask as we go along. So why do we want chickens? Yep, eggs. We want eggs. Lots of these nice eggs. And these, we've had the best eggs from our chickens. You go to the store and you get these little eggs. They're really pale, but you get
water in them. I don't
Yeah.
know where that water comes from.
I got a good comparison later, but the eggs we get from our chickens are so good. A lot more flavorful, a lot bigger.
But your chickens are free range, I mean, they have,
Yeah, they free range. But there's other benefits to chickens, like pest control. You may have seen last year, there were so many grasshoppers everywhere, all over town. I'd see hunters, I'd be walking down the sidewalk, and they'd be jumping away from me. You know where they weren't? They were not in my backyard. So our chickens just ate them all up. And so our garden was fine, there was no grasshoppers to bother our plants.
and so the chickens don't bother your garden plants, your little ones?
So we've got a fence around our garden, just so they aren't going in and eating things. In the fall, we'll open up, we'll let them eat any scraps left over, but during the growing season, we keep a fence up and we don't let them in.
But the grasshoppers that come out, they get them all, and so.
Yep, they eat them up. We also, speaking of gardening, we get fertilizer from chickens. They poop a lot, and you just scoop it up, throw it in a composter, throw in your leaves, your grass clippings, food waste. You get great fertilizer. And sometimes I'm just lazy, I'll just throw it beside the garden, and then in the fall I just spread it all over the garden plot, and then I just let it sit all winter, just let it mix into the soil. Yes?
I see that's a fertilizer, it's a roller, so you have a place you roll it, is that?
Yeah.
You don't
So
have
this
a
one has got
handle
some
to
handles, I can roll it around. It's on top of casters right there to help it roll. Is one I just made at home. Pretty easy to build. But you can get your own, or you can just make a compost pile. Or if you want to be lazy, just throw it in the fall. You don't want to put chicken poop directly on your plants, that will burn it. You want it to compost for a bit, so mix it into the soil, let it sit for a while if you're not going to compost it beforehand. But it makes great plants, and it's all free. You just get it by having the chickens. They also eat your scraps. So since we've had chickens, we've eaten a lot more fruits and vegetables, because beforehand, we didn't really want to buy fresh vegetables because we knew we weren't going to eat them all, and so it's just a cycle, you just never eat them. But then with chickens, we buy a lot more because we know if things are starting to look bad, we'll throw them at the chickens, they'll eat them all up for us. And you may have seen World War II posters about victory gardens, but did you know they made them about chickens too? So it says, 2 hens in the backyard for each person in the house will keep a family in fresh eggs. Even the smallest backyard has room for a flock large enough to supply the house with eggs. The cost of maintaining such a flock is small. Table and kitchen waste provide much of the food for the hens. They require little attention, just a few minutes a day. An interested child old enough to take little responsibility can care for a few fowls as well as a grown person. Every backyard in the United States should contribute its share to a bumper crop of poultry and eggs in 1918. In time of peace, a profitable recreation. In time of war, a patriotic duty. So Uncle Sam wants you to have chickens. And of course, they're so lovable. You can't help but love these dopey little birds. They're a lot of fun.
A question, what do you do with them in the winter?
So
Don't they freeze?
they're very good about not freezing. And some chickens are more
Hardy.
cold hardy against the cold. So you see this chicken here, she's got a full big comb on top of her head. You sometimes have to be careful about combs freezing. You might put Vaseline on it to make sure it doesn't freeze. You gotta make sure their coop is clean. If they have poop in the coop, then that's gonna give off moisture in the air. It's gonna get onto their combs and on their legs, and that'll freeze, give them frost. So make sure you're cleaning up the poop regularly. But overall, it's not too different from summer. Just have to be a little more careful.
Do you use heat warmers or like
Yes, we have a heated water to keep their water liquid. But as far as in the coop, there's no heating. They will bundle up all right next to each other. They'll keep each other warm. They've got feathers to keep them warm. So in general, there's not much you have to do to keep them warm. It's just sometimes if they start molting late in the fall, then they won't have their feathers grown back in time. You might have to take them inside until they grow their feathers in.
What do you mean by inside?
What's that?
Inside where?
Inside where?
We have a dog kennel that we'll bring our chickens in, and they'll just hang out in our bedroom.
And a dog kennel.
Yeah, just a dog kennel. Yes.
We raised chickens when I was little, and there was this one chicken that always chased me
Yeah.
to bite at my heel. And so when you have Lovable up there with that chicken, it reminded me of that chicken chasing
Yeah.
me. I grew up and became an adult. My husband had chickens, and first time I went in the backyard and saw his chicken, this is before we got married, saw his chicken, another chicken chased me. Now, I didn't do anything. Now, why do they do that? Yeah, has anybody experienced that? I had 2 chickens in my life that chased me.
We haven't had any chickens like that. The only times they run up to us is they want food. They expect food from us.
Well, I don't know. I didn't even make a face at it. And it chased me.
So chickens are not particularly bright, and if you run from them, then they're going to think that they're bigger than you.
And I did run.
Generally, the only chicken that'll chase you will be a rooster.
The roosters will be protective of the hens.
Do you have roosters or just the hens?
No, you can't have roosters in Springville,
Oh,
at
okay.
least within town limits. We'll get into the specifics of that. And also, kids love them. If you have kids, they absolutely love playing with the chickens. And whenever we go on vacation, we have neighbors watch them, and the kids love to come play with the chickens when we're gone. I don't think the chickens like it so much, but kids love to play with the chickens. So let's talk about the laws. This is the boring part, but the necessary part, just to make sure things are legal. So this is specific to Springville. If you live somewhere else, your laws may be a little bit different, so just make sure you look them up. And these are the exact laws as they appear. So within Springville, you're allowed to have chickens, and only for egg production. You're not supposed to have chickens for the purpose of meat production. You might occasionally need to cull a chicken, but in general, you should not be having meat chickens. So these laws I'm going to go over, these are specific to if you have a ½ acre or less. If you have more than a ½ acre and you are in the right zone, you have animal rights, and things are different then. That probably doesn't apply to any to you, so I'm not going to go over those laws.
Does to me.
You have more than a ½ acre?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you are in the right zone, so you have animal rights.
Which means one animal unit per 10,000 feet, right?
Something
And a
like
chicken
that.
is 1/12 of an animal unit, right?
I think that's right.
Okay.
So you can have quite a few chickens on your lot.
So you're saying in our backyards, we can have 6 chickens?
Yes. You can have up to 6 chickens in your backyard. Question here?
That zone you're talking about, is that A1, A-1?
Something like that. I don't remember the
If
exact
it's a
one.
residential zone,
Grass-fed,
I don't think you can,
because I think
you can have animals except for chickens in residences, you know, neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods. Is that right? I think that's.
A1, I'm pretty sure you can. Where I live, I'm in the right zone for it, but we have 0.45 acres. If we had, say, another 100 feet to our backyard, we would be over a ½ acre and we would have animal rights.
So you're in an A1, but most of these homes in this area in our state are R1, aren't they?
I think R1 can have animal rights if it's over a ½ acre.
If it's
But-
over a ½ acre.
You have to look at it.
Oh.
Yes.
We can't have goats then,
No.
probably. Darn it,
Yeah.
because we're next door to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lot's not big enough to have goats, unfortunately. So up to 6 chickens.
Isn't it true that you probably won't be bothered by the city if your neighbors don't care? If nobody
Yeah.
cares, they're not gonna notice or say, you know, unless you have some big farm going on there, but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
if you had 2 pygmy goats or something, they may not ever even know and care.
So,
Yep.
for beekeeping, like there are different types of violations that you can have through the city code. And the lowest level one are the type where the police won't cite you unless a neighbor complains. And for beekeeping, they fall into that category. I don't know about chicken laws.
I think it's pretty similar. No one complains, no one cares.
Because
I
there is a
know a few
rooster
people
across
who
the
have
street.
7, 8, 9 chickens. We had 7 for a little bit. The main reason for that was we lost all our chickens at one point, so we got some more. We got 8 chickens. We figured one of our chicks is gonna die, we're gonna end up with a rooster, because when you buy chicks, they say 90% chance it's going to be a female. So there's always a chance you're gonna get a male, and if you get, say, 8 chickens, I think it's a 53% chance of one of them being a rooster. And well, that's a rooster.
So what do you do with them?
So we let him grow up, and then as soon as he started crowing, a few days later, we butchered him. So
Had it for supper.
this was probably a day or two before
So,
Bucky was.
do they not care if you eat your roosters, but that's part, just saying.
You
'cause
can
it
eat your
can't be,
chickens
right.
too, you just aren't supposed to.
It's not for the
commercially
not main
sell.
purpose of chickens.
Okay,
So if you need to cull a chicken for whatever reason, it's a
Okay.
bully, it's injured, it's a rooster,
okay.
that's fine.
It's not laying anymore, but they're not very tasty and
Yeah.
good to eat, right? For the
An
most
old
part.
hen is a lot tougher. You probably want to cook it in an instant pot just to soften up the meat a little more. But roasting it, it's not going to be quite as good. It will definitely be a
But
tough
you
chicken.
eat your chickens then that are done laying?
Yeah, we've taken out one hen and then this one rooster here.
Okay, question.
Yeah.
I've thought about doing chickens, but I couldn't kill anything.
Yep.
So am I in the wrong class?
No, you don't have to do that. You can always find someone in town who will help you out.
How do you
or-
find some, can you
Find
kill
them.
my chicken?
Yeah.
I
Or
have
you-
a
there
friend
might
who
be a
does it,
local
our
butcher.
old neighbor, our last board, they do chickens and
Do they?
they'll do it.
See, I
for you.
couldn't do that. I just couldn't. Maybe if
Yeah,
I was
it's
starving,
heartbreaking.
I
Just
could.
find somebody.
I've had chickens that are injured and they were not going to survive. I put them down. It's the hardest thing.
Ask your home teacher. Or they'll tell them to find somebody, help you
Yeah.
find someone.
What's the lifespan of a chicken?
General rule of thumb is 3 years, but they will live probably a lot longer than that. 3 years is usually their productive egg life. They'll have lots of eggs at first, and then it'll slowly go down from there.
So then you eat yours after that?
We haven't had any chickens survive past
Oh.
that.
Due to
So
what?
what's killing them?
Yeah,
Local dogs usually.
local dogs.
So this past year, we had a tree fall down on our fence and smash it. It came from our neighbor's yard. Our neighbor's supposed to fix the fence, he hasn't gotten around to it. So since then, we've lost 4 chickens to
Oh.
dogs getting in.
Aw.
So
Well, see, you
it's
just
sad.
get a neighbor dog and have him cull your chicken.
Get a bigger dog.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when a dog does it, you can't use the meat.
Well, that's true, that's inhumane too.
Other requirements, you have to be in a single family house, duplex, twin home. Can't be in an apartment to have chickens, not allowed. I'm guessing triplexes, probably not, but that's more gray area. This is the exact wording of the law, so triplexes and quadplexes are not in there. And of course, they can't be a nuisance, and it's for eggs only, not specifically for meat chickens. And now let's talk about their housing. So you need to have some kind of coop, and we'll go over various requirements of what they need. So it's got to be in your backyard or in a corner. It can't be visible from the street. If it is, you're supposed to have some kind of fencing to obscure it. Mostly just so it's not an eyesore. So it needs to have solid walls, needs to look kind of like a building, not some funny thing. I saw in a picture online, someone took their trampoline, they converted it to look like a UFO, and they housed their chickens in this UFO
Oh my
building.
God.
So according to Springville law, You can't make your trampoline look like Springville and use it as a UFO and use it as a coop. It's gotta look like a typical accessory building. And it has to keep predators out. It does not have to keep 2-year-olds out, and it probably won't. They will get in there, they will play with the chickens. Chickens won't be happy, but the 2-year-old will be happy. Now for some specifics, you need to have 2.5 square feet of area inside the coop per chicken. Now that is conditional. There's also a chicken run. So the coop, that's where they sleep. And you have nesting boxes, that's where they lay eggs. The run is an enclosed area outside the coop they can go to play. And you should have 6 square feet per chicken in that. Or if you don't have a run, then your coop needs to have 6 square feet inside. So bigger coop if you don't have a run.
Do
Just
you
keep
think
that in
the
mind.
eggs are as good if the chickens are in an enclosed as opposed to having the whole yard?
There's a definite difference between cage-free, and free-roam chickens.
Right.
They,
Eat a lot more insects and
yes, they eat more
vegetation.
bugs, they can get more protein. They're also generally more happy if they have more area to roam.
Yeah,
Although I've seen lots of pictures of people saying, we got 3 acres out here and the chickens always just hang out on the porch and poop on it.
yeah. What do you do about that? Cause I'd like to let them run free, but the grandkids come and they scratch anything around the tree, you know, if you put a little bark in there, you're not gonna have any bark around your trees.
Yeah, you have to find some way to protect those
Yeah,
areas.
yeah.
Put some kind of fence up or mesh.
Yeah.
And there's also requirements of how close it can be to your house, how close it can be to neighbors' houses, all those fun details. I won't go over the specifics, you can read it there.
Huh.
And you need to keep it sanitary. You should clean it every week. It's a good idea. Don't let the poop build up, especially in the winter because that moisture is going to come up off of it. It'll get onto the chickens and make them more likely to get frostbite. So keep it clean.
So did you make that, is that like the feeder or like the water thing? Or,
Yeah, the water there, that's a commercial one we just bought.
okay,
The feeders, we made those. Those are really cheap and easy to make. And this is the roller pigeon coop you can see in our
are the
backyard.
PVC pipe things feeders or?
Yeah,
what
those
are-
are feeders.
Oh, cool.
We put food in there.
Cool, okay.
And technically, chickens are not allowed to roam outside the coop or enclosure. We kind of consider our backyard enclosed, at least until the tree fell over and smashed the fence.
Right.
So if you let them out of an enclosure, you always have the risk that some predator is going to get them. And just be aware, you'll lose chickens. That happens. Yes.
Going back to not being too close to your house, is that for health reasons or just for rules? I mean, for your
They
family's
just wanna
health
make rules.
reasons.
I think it's mostly just to have enough space.
For the chicken?
Yeah.
Oh,
And also, you're not, there's the requirement about not being too close to your neighbors, so it's not causing problems to them. There's also the smell of the poop. There is some concern about that, but it usually dries up very quickly. Especially if you put sand in the bottom of your coop, it'll dry up very fast and there's almost no smell to it. Now we have food dispensers. So it's gotta be rodent and predator proof. It does not require deer proof, unfortunately. We've had problems with deer. They come through our backyard all the time. They just hop over the fence. And for a while, they would knock over our feeder and they just roll it around the yard and then they eat all the food that's spilled out. So in this picture, you can see that I have the feeder hanging. So it's like a piñata, but this piñata doesn't give out its treats. And those holes are just big enough for the chickens to get in and get it. So just be aware.
Do the deer
things will get-
bother the chickens?
What bother chickens?
The deer?
They don't like the deer. They'll stay away from it, but
Cause
The
our
deer-
yard has deer in constantly,
yeah, we do too.
day and night.
So deer will eat eggs if they have the chance.
Okay.
They
So the deer
kind of
probably won't
forage
bother the
around.
chickens. The chickens will steer clear of the deer.
I have a question on this slide. So this bucket is on the ground?
No, it's not on the ground. It's about 6 inches above.
6 inches above the ground. And
So
why
I
is that?
situated it about chicken head height, so you just poke their head in those holes, eat the food, pop out. I've got a better picture later when we go into.
So the deer can't get into it. So
Yeah,
that's
they
one
can't
reason.
fit their nose in there, too small. Speaking of food, let's get right into that. So there's different types of feed you'll find if you go out to IFA or some country store. You'll see starter feed, pullet developer, layer feed, broiler feed. In general, when you got chicks, you'll start them with starter feed. When they get a little bit older, you'll switch to the pullet developer. A pullet is a
Female chicken that hasn't laid eggs yet, but is no
Yeah.
longer a chick.
basically a teenage female chicken. And there's a cockerel, it's a teenage male chicken. So usually you just have those when they're starting out, and then you'll switch to the layer feed. And then there's also broiler feed, that's for the meat chickens, so they can gain weight really fast. So really, you're just gonna deal mostly with the layer feed. If you start from chicks, you'll have the starter and pullet developer. And you also have variations of these. There's pellets, you can imagine what those look like. Crumble is just pellets that have been broken up into smaller pieces, and mash is the crumble that's been smashed even smaller. So we generally like the pellets, because if the chickens knock it out of the feeder, it's easy for them to pick it up off the ground. But if you get the mash, it's very small, very fine, it gets mixed into the dirt, and they don't pick it up, and there's a lot more waste. And you also see different protein variations. The typical kind has 16% protein, and that's normally what you feed them. And then there's higher proteins that'll go up to 18 or 20%. You give that to chickens when they're molting. They need the extra protein to grow their feathers. You give it to them in the winter, help keep them a little more warm. But in general, you'll use the regular feed. And there's lots of other different things you can give them. Mealworms are a great treat for them. It's just mealworms that have been dried up. And it not only is it a great treat, it's very nutritious for them. There's lots of protein in there, so it's good to mix that in. There's also oyster shell. If you're getting thin shells, you might feed them oyster shell to help give them more calcium. Sunflower seeds are a good treat. They're not very nutritional, but they're good to have on hand. Now, the previous class was about cooking with food storage. You got your old grain, you don't know what to do with it, throw it in some water, let it sprout, give it to chickens, they love it so much. There's also any bugs in your backyard, they will gobble those up, and food scraps. We need to go over specifics of that in a minute, of what you can and can't feed them. Well, let's show you some feeders, these are some close-ups. On the left, this is just a 5-gallon bucket, this had mealworms in it. I chose this one as Pacific because it had a more square shape, and it was easier to put these food holes on them. You can buy these conversion kits to turn any 5-gallon bucket into a feeder. Just find those on Amazon. And super easy to make. They also work with round buckets, but I found it easier with the square bucket. But you can use whatever you have on hand. The first feeders we made with these PVC pipes, they're super simple. It's just a straight pipe, a couple of elbows, and a couple caps. And that's all there is to it. So we would put caps on the bottom opening, we'd pour in the food, and then put a cap on top, pull out the cap on bottom. And they were great. With 10 feet, you can probably make 4 of them, and then just a bunch of elbows and caps. Super easy to make. And we could go over all the kinds of different foods they can eat, but that's effectively infinite. So we're going to talk about some of the specific things to avoid. Big things, don't give them too much salt, too much sugar. If it's not good for you, it's not good for the chickens. Don't give them chocolate. Don't give them, you don't want to give them apple seeds or fruit pits. Those have trace amounts of arsenic. If they eat a little bit of seeds, they'll be fine, but don't let them eat too many. Don't give them avocado. Don't give them raw potatoes. You can give them your potato peelings if you want, but make sure to cook the peels first. Because potatoes are actually toxic. You gotta cook it to kill the toxin in them. And that's not good for the chickens. Dry beans and rice. If it's dry, don't give it to the chickens. Because what they're gonna do, they're gonna fill their bellies full of dry beans and rice, and what's gonna happen, they'll drink some water, it's gonna expand. Not good for the chickens. They won't be able to digest if they're that full. Don't give them onion. Don't give them raw eggs. Now the reason for eggs is not because it's necessarily bad for them. If they get a taste for raw eggs, then you'll never see eggs again. They'll just eat them. This is especially true in the summer. If they get really thirsty and you don't give them sufficient water, sometimes they'll just start eating their eggs because they'll be too dry and they'll try to find any water source they can.
I've seen people that they'll give their egg shells, so that it's kinda like the oyster thing.
Yes, you can feed chickens eggshells. So what you do is you save your eggshells, you crush them up, and you bake them for some temperature, for some amount, I forget. And then you can feed that to them. You can mix it in with their feed. It's a great way to get extra calcium. It's not as effective as oyster shell, but it's great because it's effectively free.
With the onion, does that also apply to like shallots and garlic too?
Shallots, probably. Garlic, I think is generally a good thing to feed chickens.
Okay.
And I don't remember the reason behind onion. There's other things I could include on this list. Just do your research if you have any questions. But in general, a lot of people foods, chickens will eat fine. And there's other things like lettuce. Lettuce is great for them. Don't give them too much lettuce because it has high water content. You'll have chickens with diarrhea. So, not really bad, it's just a little unpleasant. So, next up is water. One of the most common ways to provide water is these gravity waters. You flip the bucket upside down, you fill it up, put the cap on, flip it back down, and it just slowly dispenses water as they drink it. You can find those pretty much anywhere. Go to IFA, any country store. You can also find these little nipple waters. I haven't tried them, but they're an option out there. And the chickens just peck at the little nipple and they'll get water. These are not good for winter because if they freeze, they're just gonna break. There's also these bowl waters. So they peck at that little yellow thing in the bowl and it fills the bowl with water and they can drink from it. These can kind of work in winter if you've got a heater in there, but I haven't tried them myself.
Those are the ones that those are like the ones that we use, but instead of having a nipple for the chicken to peck, it's gravity and a spring.
Okay.
So like when there's not enough water in the cup, it's not heavy enough to hold the spring down, so
It'll
it
fill
goes up and then it opens the valve and fills it up again.
Makes sense.
But yeah, as long as the water is not frozen, they work.
Another good thing to do is make sure there's lots of water sources in different places. You may have heard about the pecking order. So there is a hierarchy within chicken flocks. There's one chicken on top. That chicken gets to eat first, then the second, then the third. If someone eats out of order, then they get pecked. So it's good to have them in multiple places because then top chicken can go over here while bottom chicken might go over here and they can all get water sources. Also, if during the summer, if they're roaming, you have shade in one place, they might prefer one part of the yard, but later in the day, a different place may be shady and they'll want water over there. So spread it around. It's good to have apple cider vinegar in your water. It's good for the chickens, it helps kill off worms in their digestive tracts. It's good nutrition in there. It also helps kill off any algae growth in there or help reduce it substantially so you don't have to clean them as often. Though if you have metal waters, do not use vinegar in there. It will corrode them. And in the winter, it will help lower the freezing temperature of the water. So it's less likely to freeze. But it gets cold here, make sure you have a heated water. Either that or you have to swap them out. So what we did for a while before we had a heated one is we had two waters. We'd bring one out. When that one freezes, we'd bring out another one, bring the other one in, and we just keep rotating these waters out. It's a lot more work that way, but it works.
It's apple cider vinegar, right? Not just a white vinegar.
Yeah, apple cider vinegar.
How much per gallon?
I don't remember. You have to look it up. I've gotten to where I know the amount, so I
Yeah.
just dump it in. Yeah, in the summer, chickens do get dehydrated, and when they get dehydrated, sometimes they get extra dumb, and they stop drinking water. And You put water right in front of them and they'll just stare at it, won't know what to do with it. So sometimes what you have to do is you put little sunflower seeds in the water, they'll float. You get the black oil sunflower seeds, they float nicely, and they'll peck at the seeds and they'll get water in the process. But in general, don't put too many in there because the sunflower seeds don't have a lot of nutritional value. It's just something to encourage them to drink water if they're not. But best solution, watermelon by far. We often have watermelon in the summer, and we'll cut it so there's lots of meat left on the rind. That way, chickens have this great treat we'll give to them. We don't have to have any rind flavor in our watermelon. We both win, and there's no waste. They'll eat it all clear down to the rind. And sometimes what I'll do is we'll have so much watermelon from one meal. They'll take, say, half of it, put it in the fridge, give them half now. And then during the hot day of the summer, we'll give them the other half that's already been chilled. So it's cool, it provides water, and helps the chickens. Yes?
Could you freeze the watermelon and give that?
Yes, you can freeze it.
Would
They
still
might
eat
not
it
eat
after
it,
it's
but
frozen?
as it thaws out, they will eat it.
Well, I mean, no, they would eat it once they don't care if it's frozen or fresh.
Yeah, they'll eat it just fine. So let's talk about shelter. So we mentioned some of this already when we were going over the laws. The coop is where they sleep. Make sure you got enough space, and make sure you have roosts. Chickens in general will want to roost on bars. They don't like to sleep on the ground, although we had some chickens that absolutely insisted on it. We gave them roosts. Nope, they wanted to sleep on the floor. That's what they wanted. But in general, chickens do like to roost. Now the chicken run, it's an enclosed area where they can go outside, get some nice sunlight, but also be safe from predators. And there's various structures you can make. We made this all out of just salvaged wood and chicken wire or hardware cloth. So the chicken wire is this hexagonal shape here. We only use that because we ran out of hardware cloth. If you're trying to keep predators out, you want the hardware cloth. It looks like a grid of wires. It is much tougher, more durable. If we had something like a cougar come out of the mountains and try to get your chickens, they'll take out the chicken wire, no problem. But the hardware cloth, they won't be able to take that out. And generally that's not a problem, but when we have fires up here on the mountain, we will have wildlife come into town, so be aware of that. Don't let your chickens out when there's a wildfire. And then nesting boxes. The general rule of thumb is you want to have one nesting box for every 2 chickens. If you buy a prefabricated chicken coop, sometimes they'll say this holds 6 chickens or 8 chickens. Don't believe those numbers. They like to inflate it. Count the number of nesting boxes, multiply it by 2, that's how many chickens it holds usually. And they often won't give you the square footage, but usually that rule is about right. And even though you have a nesting box for every 2 chickens, you always have the favorite nesting box that they all want, and they all want to share it, even if it's at the same time.
Yeah.
So you'll have them, but they may not use them all. There's also some medical care we need to talk about. It's a good idea to be aware of the vets in the area if you need to take a chicken in for care, but you are the first responder for your chickens. It's good to know how to take care of things. And you'll have things like broken toes. You'll have broken beaks. You'll have chickens that fight and they'll peck each other and you'll get blisters.
Would there be something online, like Chicken First Aid 101 or something?
Yeah, you can find things online.
Yeah.
We'll go over some of the basics of things you should have on hand. But I won't go into too many specifics because there's a lot of things that can happen. And it's just a good idea to be ready for it. And it doesn't happen very often. This chicken, you can see she's got some eye discharge. Chickens have a second eyelid to cover their eyes. So if they get dirt in their eyes, usually it's not a problem, but this one got dirt in her eyes, and so we had to clean it out, and then a few days later she was good to go. There's also broken claws. In general, they'll scratch a lot to get bugs and whatnot. But for whatever reason, this one didn't want to scratch, so her claws got long and we had to trim it. Although this one, I went to go trim her claws, she fought it, and then she broke it anyway. I tried to help, but She didn't want to have any of it. Chickens are also prone to respiratory diseases. I don't think I have the volume on, but this chicken is asleep and she's snoring. It's the funnest sound. My daughter came running in, Dad, Dad, the chicken is crying, but it's snoring. And you can see I've got her in a dog kennel, there's food, there's water. Sometimes I'll put a nesting box in there if they're wanting to lay eggs. It's good to have something to enclose them in if they're sick. And if you don't have a kennel, a big box like a miter saw box works great. This was our first chicken hospital. Don't use it forever, it will absorb the poop and the pee and all the smells that come with it, so it's a very temporary thing. The dog kennels are great to have because you can clean them out. For respiratory diseases, you want to have VetRx. It's some natural oils. You put it on their beak, under their wings. You put a little bit in their water, change out the water daily, and it helps clear out their sinuses and their lungs and whatnot. There's also blue coat. It's a germicidal, fungicidal, but also chickens love to peck at things that are red. And if a chicken is bleeding, other chickens are just gonna peck at it. And if they keep that long enough, they'll kill the poor thing. So not only does it kill germs and whatnot, it's a very heavy blue dye. Do not get this on your clothes. It will not come out. It'll turn the chicken blue so that there's not the red there, so chickens won't peck at it. You might also have problems with mites, so you want to get poultry dust if in that case, or there's also diatomaceous earth. Rub it all over the chicken. Don't breathe it in. Don't get it on your clothes, your hands, and that'll help kill off any bugs. But in general, chickens are good about keeping.
Why
the
would
bugs
it
off.
hurt your hands?
Just because if you get it on your hands, you're gonna touch your face and it's all over. So I make sure to wear gloves when I use it. You may also want to have some electrolytes. You just pour it into their water. You can make your own electrolyte solution, something like water, sugar, salts, maybe a couple other things. I think baking soda. You can find different electrolyte solutions online that you can mix up yourself. And if you make an electrolyte solution, change it out daily so it doesn't go bad. You want to have bandages, not like Band-Aids. You want to have actual bandages and gauze and whatnot. You can wrap up wounds. You want to have ointment, but make sure it doesn't have lidocaine or benzocaine or any of those other canes, any of those numbing agents. You just want regular ointment because the lidocaine and other numbing agents are toxic to chickens. It's also good to have a portable nesting box. If they're in the chicken hospital, then they'll have somewhere to lay eggs if they are laying. And dog claw clippers, if they aren't scratching and wearing down those claws, you'll need to trim them. Make sure to have that on hand if you have a chicken not scratching. Maybe I did this a little out of order. We're going to talk about hygiene. And maybe some things will make more sense here. So chickens, they dust bathe. I don't know why they naturally know how to do this, but they go find a soft patch of dirt and they'll just throw it all over themselves. And what this does is this gets all the bugs off. And not only is it good for hygiene, it's actually a social activity. If you have one chicken start dust bathing, everyone comes in and they start dust bathing together. And while they're digging, they might find a bug. They'll have a little snack while they're taking their bath. It's all a great time for everybody. So make sure you provide one. If you don't, they will do it in the middle of your yard or wherever else they can. Again, clean the coop. Clean it out weekly, especially during the winter because all the water vapor that comes off. And also there's going to be ammonia coming off of it. So that's not good for the chickens. It can burn their eyes and give them respiratory issues. So clean the coop. Then there's molting. Every year the chickens are going to lose their feathers and grow them back. This happens usually about 18 months of age and then every 12 months. This typically happens in the fall if you get chickens in the spring. So when they're growing feathers, make sure they're getting extra protein and they're not going to lay eggs. All their energy is going into these new feathers, so no eggs during this time.
How long does it take? The molting?
It varies, and also the kind of molting varies. They may have, lots of chickens will have a soft molt where they lose a few feathers at a time, grow back, lose more feathers. It's more of a gradual process. Other chickens will just lose all their feathers. They'll just be naked. And that's not quite as common, but it does happen.
What time of year do they molt?
Usually in the fall. Oftentimes you'll get chickens in the spring just because that's a good time of year. And that's when the hatcheries will provide chicks to IFA and other country stores. So in the fall, the following year, they'll have their first molt, and then every fall after that, they'll have their molts. And when they're molting, sometimes they're a little sensitive about it or insecure, and they'll go hide. Because sometimes when they're molting, other chickens will beat them up if they kind of look down on them. They become bottom of the pecking order almost automatically when they're molting. So they may be hard to find during that time.
So have you found any way to prevent that pecking, picking on certain ones?
There's different ideas out there. Some people say give your chickens toys. If they're busy pecking at a toy, they won't peck at the chickens. If they're too crowded, they will definitely peck each other. They need to have space. That's why there's the laws about having 2.5 square feet per chicken, or 6 if you don't have a run. Because they need to have space. If they're too crowded, they will fight no matter what you do.
And what about having chickens that are the same size rather than having some smaller breeds and some larger?
That definitely helps. Also, if you have, say, let's say you have 4 chickens and then later you get 2 more chickens, the 2 chickens you introduce will probably get bullied because they're new to the flock and it may take some time to integrate them. So it varies. You may also have a bully. We had a bully and she didn't necessarily kill the chickens, but she kind of killed their will to live. It was very sad. So she was separated until she got butchered because she was a major problem. And maybe that chicken that chased you, maybe it was a bully and saw you as low or pecking order. So when you have a bully, you have 2 options. You could cull the bully, but maybe it's your best producing chicken and maybe you're better off having fewer chickens. But in general, you'll cull the bully, but you may cull the one that's being picked on because it's maybe not as healthy, smaller.
Right.
So you got to make the decision of what to do in that case. So let's talk about eggs. I mentioned earlier I had a comparison. So you see that little blob? That's a grocery store egg. For this picture, I wanted it to be whole, but as soon as it hit the bowl, it just splattered. But that dark orange one, that is a homegrown chicken egg. So lots of times you'll see that it's almost an orange color. It was weird at first, but now when I see grocery store eggs, I would think, why is that egg so pale? That's a very anemic egg from maybe an anemic chicken. But you'll find when a chicken is free-ranging, they'll have very orange eggs. They'll have a much more varied diet. They'll get greater protein. They'll have more bugs in their diet. So they tend to turn out a lot darker. And from their eggs, you actually tell the general health. If you're getting pale eggs, the chicken might be going to molt soon, it might be dehydrated, it might be stressed, it might be bullied. So that's a good indicator of what's going on. You want to have these darker orange eggs, not the white ones. So, fun fact, if you don't wash your eggs, you don't need to refrigerate them. So in the US, we have this obsession with hygiene. And so they wash and they bleach the eggs, which actually counterintuitively, that makes eggs less safe. Because eggs have a natural bloom on them that helps keep bacteria out, but you wash them, you lose that bloom. And that's why you have to refrigerate the egg, because if any bacteria gets in, it's gonna grow. But in other countries, it's illegal to wash eggs and sell them, because they wanna have that natural bloom. Now, make sure your chickens aren't sleeping in the nesting boxes, because they're gonna poop on the eggs. They poop in their sleep. So keep them out of the nesting boxes. You might have to go in every evening, take them off, out of the nesting box, put them onto a roost, because for some reason they sometimes insist on sleeping in nesting boxes. Or you might have to close off the nesting boxes if you have that option.
One of the things that can help is to make sure that the roosts are higher than the nesting box, because
Yes, they
they
do like to go
normally
higher.
want to go to the highest spot they can.
Yeah, you can also find out pecking order by roost level. Higher pecking order chickens, they get the high roosts. Lower pecking order, they get the lower roosts. So it's a fun way to figure that out. And again, if you're having really thin shells on your eggs, then give them oyster shell or feed them egg shell with their food, and that'll help get them more calcium they need. You can get nesting pads. There's some more disposable, some are washable. I like the washable ones just because you don't want to keep buying new ones. You just wash off the nesting pads. And make sure you collect the eggs daily. Now I said the unwashed eggs don't need to be refrigerated, but if they get left overnight and it gets really cold and it gets warm again, it's best to stick those into the fridge. You don't want the egg getting cold and warm and cold and warm. That can help grow more bacteria in them. So in general, collect them daily, stick them on the counter, they'll be fine. But if they've been overnight and it got really cold, then make sure to stick them in the fridge. Then there's weird eggs. One of these eggs is not like the other. This is a fun chart I found at IFA. You probably can't read it, but these are all different conditions that can happen with eggs. I'll show you a few and some of the reasons that these eggs turn out this way. If you want later, I can give you this picture. So this is what I like to call sandpaper eggs. There's nothing really wrong with this egg. This chicken had excessive calcium, and so there's all these little extra calcium deposits on that. You can eat it, it's just fine. I just feel so bad for the chicken because that probably hurt coming out. It really feels like sandpaper when you hold these eggs. This one's a wrinkle egg or a pruning egg. This is a chicken that's a little dehydrated, maybe stressed or bullied, and the eggshell just looks really wrinkly. You can eat these eggs just fine, but oftentimes when I got these kind of eggs, the eggshells were really thin, so you gotta be careful not to break the shell. But as long as the shell's not broken, you can eat them, they're fine. Now in general, if you get an egg that you don't want to eat, what I like to do is I'll scramble them up, let it cool down, and feed it to the chickens. Eggs are great for chickens too. And again, make sure you scramble them because if it looks like an egg, they'll start to think eggs are a great food source, I should eat those. Make sure it does not look like an egg. You have eggs with tails. This one on the left, it has no shell on it. No shell eggs are really weird. There's nothing wrong with having a tail, but this one having no shell, I would not eat that. It'd be fine to fry it up, feed it to the chickens. And these ones on the right, they are fully formed, fully shelled, but they kept a little tail on them. And when they got the shell on the egg, it went over the top tail too, which kind of looks funny. Those ones are fine. They have shells, they're intact, you can eat those. They just look funny. This one is a no yolk egg. There's no yolk, it's all just albumin on the inside. And it's super tiny, it was about the size of a marble. You'll know when you get those ones. Now this one I thought was a no yolk egg, but you see there, that is a teeny tiny yolk in there. This came from a chicken that was just barely laying, and lots of weird eggs happen when chickens are really young or really old, or if they start molting and they start going back into laying eggs, because their body is still getting into the egg production process, and they tend to be a little weird. But this egg was fine. We cooked it up and we ate it. Just tiny, tiny yolk. And then you get double yolkers. Just like humans can have twins, chickens can lay double yolkers or even triple yolkers. You can see on the left there's a regular size egg, and on the right is the double yolker. Again, I feel bad for the chicken that laid it. That's about the size of a duck egg, maybe even a turkey egg. Probably hurt coming out, but nothing wrong with it. Just had 2 yolks.
Oh, no.
This is a no yolker. I got a video of it. It's like a water balloon. They're so weird. It has no shell on it. Don't eat it, but you can fry it up, feed it to the chickens. Let's talk about some breeds of chickens. I'm going to go over the, yes, question.
How long can you keep or store a unwashed egg as a rule?
I've kept them 2-3 months. That's probably longer than the FDA says, but
Yeah.
we have any problems with
I
it.
heard that you could keep them 6 months.
Wow. Cool.
which wouldn't surprise me. There are ways of preserving eggs. We're trying out water glassing. FDA doesn't approve of that, but we're trying it anyway, see what it does.
As long
You
as
can
keep
freeze them, you
As long as
can
you keep them
freeze dry
cool
them.
Out of this, cool, dry area.
Well, it helps you get through the winter
Yeah.
when there's less egg laying.
Yeah. And some people during the winter will provide artificial light for their chickens, and they'll keep producing eggs. We haven't done that, so we haven't gotten any eggs during the winter. But some
What are
people,
the pros and cons of that?
some people notice their chickens being a little bit more agitated in the winter if they have artificial light, because it's not real sunlight.
Yeah.
So you might have more bullying and fighting, but I haven't tried it myself.
What about with their egg laying capacity?
So chickens are born with the number of eggs that they're going to lay in their lifetime.
Right.
And so if you're artificially speeding up the process of them laying eggs, they will reach the age where they stop laying eggs sooner.
Right.
Which if you're a commercial production, then that just means less time you're feeding them.
Right.
But if they're your pet, then
So you decide how you want it. So these are, I'm gonna go over a bunch of breeds that I've encountered. These are breeds that I've raised myself. My sister has chickens, my brother has chickens. And do some research on this. Egg production, egg color, size, lots of things are gonna vary. Some are more cold hardy, which you may want here in Utah because it does get very cold. But at the same time, be aware of heat hardiness too. My sister has chickens that are very, very cold hardy, but they have a hard time during the summer when it gets hot. So it's a balance. You don't want them to die of heat exhaustion during the summer, but you don't want them to freeze to death in the winter. So here is a Brahma. They are known as the king of poultry. For many years, these were the main meat chickens, but they also produce a good number of eggs per year. So these are known as a dual purpose chicken. They're very, very large chickens, especially get a rooster, they get very big. But they're also known to not be very good mothers. They are so big, they're prone to step on their chicks.
Yep.
So they're big, big chickens. Our neighbors had chickens, had these Brahmas, and one of them was named Tiny. Tiny was bigger than all of our chickens.
Put together, huh?
Very big chickens. Now these are Lohman Browns. These are my favorite chickens. They are absolutely prolific layers. This was our first flock. They were rescue chickens abandoned by a farmer, so we took 6 of them since that's what Springville allowed. They laid very big eggs. We couldn't close our egg cartons because they were just so big. And they laid every day, almost without fail. So they get 290 to 320 eggs per year. Lots and lots of eggs, absolute prolific layers.
Do you buy just one breed and have 7 of one breed? Or is it's kind of nice
Mix.
fun to have a mixture of different ones?
It's up to you whether you want to have mixed or all the same. Our first flock were all Lohman Browns since we rescued them.
Yeah.
Our second flock is mixed, and you'll see some of them. So there's pros and cons. One of the nice things of having mixed chickens is if you get the right breeds, they have different color eggs, so you know
Yeah.
who's laying an egg. When they're all the same, you have no idea who's laying. You got to see who's in the box.
Yeah.
So they have brown eggs? Is that what they
Yeah,
call
they have
them?
brown eggs. We got Americanas. So these two here are both Americanas, but they're different feather colors. One on the left is a light Americana, one on the right is a dark Americana, but there's other colorations as well. And lots of different breeds will have different feather patterns. They will lay green or brown eggs, but you don't know until they're laying whether you get green or brown eggs. These two both lay green eggs, so we know when they're laying. Rhode Island Reds, these are the most common chickens you see. The Lohman Browns I mentioned earlier, they are a crossbreed of Rhode Island Red and I think a Barred Rock. So they are also very high yield in eggs. They tend to be smaller chickens, they're nice temperaments, which makes them very common for backyard chickens. And poor Georgia here, she was molting, a lot of her feathers were growing back in, but she had this one tail feather that would not fall out. She's got this one tail feather. have barred rocks, another common one. They don't lay quite as many eggs, but they're a good chicken. And you'll see that she has a very small comb. It's called a pea comb, just little nubs sticking up. This makes it better for winter, but it makes it harder for her during the summer because she doesn't have a big comb to give off heat. So again, it's the trade-off of heat hardiness versus cold hardiness. And then you have Orpingtons. They have various colorations as well. This is a buff Orpington. They give 200 eggs per year, except for Bucky here. He's a male. He just got eaten for dinner. Now these are my sister's chickens. She has a giant cochin and very, very heat hardy. You can see it has feathers on its legs to help it keep warm, which is great for winter, but really bad for summer. They also don't lay nearly as many eggs, only 150 to 200 per year. And silver-laced Wyandotte, very similar. It's a very cold hardy chicken, but does not have feathers on the legs, so it can cope with summer better. And a different variation, there's a blue-laced Wyandotte. And I think there's 2 or 3 other different colorations you can find of them. And these are my brother's chickens. He raised Cornish crosses. You'll notice no egg listing there. These are specifically meat chickens. So with meat chickens, they're generally bred so that they will grow very big, very fast. So they're butchered oftentimes before 16 weeks.
Wow.
And because they grow so fast, it's often harder on their heart and they'll often just kill over dead. So they often die before they even get the chance to lay eggs. They're strictly a meat chicken, and since we can't primarily raise meat chickens, you probably won't see any of these. But have you ever seen a Cornish game hen? That's actually a Cornish cross. It's just butchered earlier, so it's smaller. But it's the same thing. And these are the main meat chickens these days. Okay, last thing, we're gonna go over raising chicks. We're just gonna go week by week of different things to expect if you choose to start from chicks. And it's also possible you may start with big chickens. You could get them from a farm. You may have some neighbors move and you inherit their chickens, or for whatever reason. But if you raise from chicks, you need to be ready to raise them. Otherwise, you may have them die on you. So, most important thing is get them home immediately. You may go to IFA or whatever country store. They'll give you this keep box, give you the chicks, get them home. They need to be in a heated brooder. The most common way to heat it is with a heat lamp. I don't necessarily recommend it. Heat lamps are a fire hazard if they break. Also with our first flock we raised from chicks, we got the heat lamp and we got home and it didn't work. So that was fun. And the store was closed at that point, so we couldn't go back and exchange it.
Oh,
So we had to come up with something else instead. So make sure they've got food and water, keep their brooder clean. So this is the same dog kennel you saw earlier. We converted it into a brooder. And we quickly found out that these chicks are so small they can jump between the bars. So we had to cut up a box and whatnot, and put it around it to make sure they couldn't get out. You can see on the right they've got their feeder, on the left they've got their water, and you're going to have to clean them out frequently because they're going to want to scratch at whatever their bedding is, and they'll throw it in the food and the water. And they are just adorable. Enjoy them while they're this stage. They will not last long, as you'll see soon. So this was our emergency heat solution. We had this parabolic space heater, and this kept them warm. You can see they're all bundled up right next to it in the corner. We checked on them every hour to make sure the temperature's still good. And every hour we checked them, they slowly moved away and away from the heat source because they will move closer and further from their heat source in order to stay warm. So don't put, if you have a heat source like a space heater like this one or a heat lamp, don't put it right in the middle, put it on the side. That way they have room to roam so they can choose the heat that they need. And this was our ultimate solution for heating. You'll see on the right here this yellow thing. This is just a heating plate meant to simulate a mother hen. What you do is you set it at an angle, and the chicks will walk underneath there, and they can choose how much contact they want with the heating plate. And these are great because it's not a fire hazard. It's only warm enough to be like a mother hen. So you won't have to worry about burning your house.
They're not
with these.
under her then. They don't need it. They don't need it.
At the moment, they don't, but they're all bunched up together, so they're keeping themselves warm.
Yeah.
But if they need a little bit more warmth, they would migrate onto the heater. You can also see this has 4 different posts it's on. You can raise it and lower it. So every week we would raise this up a little bit, but we'd still keep it at an angle so they can choose how much contact they want with it. So now we're in week 2. You want to drop, if you're using some heat source, make sure the heat drops by 5 degrees. And every week you're going to drop the heat by 5 degrees. If you're using this brooder heater that we've got, then again, they can choose how much contact they want with that. So you don't have to change temperature, it's just always the same temperature. And make sure you're playing around with the chicks. Let them get comfortable with you, get to know you. That way when they're older, they'll be familiar with you and want to come to you. Otherwise, you'll be chasing them down, and chickens run faster than humans. You cannot catch them. Week 3, you're gonna start seeing some feathers. They're losing the cute phase. They're getting into this weird mutant halfway phase. It looks weird. And if you're finding that your brooder is too small, you might need to increase space. And you want to start adding some roosts, something for them to stand on so they start learning to roost. Week 4, you're going to be mostly feathered. Again, keep changing the food and the water. If you have bedding in there, change that out. And you can see they no longer look like a chick. They look like a very small chicken now. This is kind of the ugly duckling phase. They're kind of cute, kind of not. But interact with them. Yeah, that one wanted to eat my mole. She thought it was food. But let them get to know you. And you can see this is a mixed flock. We've got Barred Rocks, we've got Americanas, Rhode Island Reds, Buff Orpingtons. And you can tell how comfortable they are with you. If they will eat out of your hands, they're usually pretty close to you. If they run away, then you need to slowly get more interaction with them so they're comfortable coming to you. Week 5. At this point, if the temperature is above 60 degrees Fahrenheit, then you don't need any heat anymore. And at this point, they're probably getting too big for that brooder heater anyway. You can't fit all the chickens under it. You're getting the adult feathers now. And it's a very good idea to move out to the garage if you can. When they're getting their adult feathers, they come in and they kind of look like porcupine quills. The feather is all encapsulated in a sheath. And they'll peck at that sheath to break the feather free. And that makes dust, and that dust goes everywhere. And at this point, they may decide they want to start dust bathing. And if they got poop in there, they'll start flinging poop all over the place. So if you can get them out to the garage and it's warm enough, do that. It's great. There'll be a lot less cleaning later. Our mudroom still kind of smells like chicken dust. We just can't seem to get rid of it. So as soon as you can get them outside, the better. Week 6, they can go to outside proper. They can have little day trips. Make sure you lock them up. And this is the point where you switch from the starter feed to the pullet developer. Really, you switch them once they finish off the bag. One bag will probably get 6 chickens through 6 weeks. And make sure they have a dust bath. They're going to want to dust bathe. You don't want them flinging poop everywhere. It's not fun. It's stinky. Now we have week 7. They're getting bigger. You can see Bucky here is starting to get a comb. Get week 8. They look like proper chickens. They're small chickens, but they look like full chickens now. You get to week 10. They're getting bigger. Week 12, bigger. Week 14, even bigger. Now it's 16. This is probably about the time they're going to start laying eggs. This is the earliest you'll get them to eggs, but oftentimes you won't get it till later. You start them on layer feed, getting them the calcium. Specifically, that's why you have the layer feed, because it has calcium in there, in addition to other things, so that they can have that for laying eggs. Now, a good thing to do is to put fake eggs into the nesting boxes. Or if you don't want to go out and buy ceramic eggs, they're expensive. Go buy golf balls, they work great. And that just teaches them that's where the eggs go. Because if you don't teach them where the eggs go, they will choose where they go. And you'll find them in bushes and wherever they want to lay them. And if you happen to have a rooster like we did at this point, he's gonna start showing interest in the pullets, but at this point, the pullets were not interested in him because they weren't laying eggs yet. But when you walk up to a pullet and she squats down, that's her submitting to be mated. And if you see a chicken doing that, then there's a good chance you have eggs somewhere. Because if she wants to be mated, there's going to be eggs. It's also a good sign if it's winter and you start seeing the chickens squat down for mating, then you're probably getting eggs again. They're starting back up. Now, week 20, this is about the time when you should have your first eggs. Most are around week 20, some might be later, some might be earlier, but week 20 is a pretty typical time for chickens to start laying eggs. And again, first eggs tend to be weird. You might have the no-yolkers, you might have misshapen eggs, wrinkle eggs, all kinds of weird eggs. But most of them will be fine to eat as long as they've got a shell on them, as long as they're intact. And that's everything. Do you have any questions?
And that last slide, you had a bullet about singing an egg song. What's-
Yes, the egg song. So the typical sound when you hear a chicken say, "Bark," if you hear that, they make that sound when they lay an egg. Now, when one chicken hears that sound, they all join in on the chorus. So if you have neighbors with chickens and they lay an egg, your chickens will start singing the song too. It is the happiest song you'll ever hear, and you know you're starting to get eggs. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.